There are two kinds of silent daughters in a family. One stays silent because she is obedient, because she is afraid of disappointing the adults, because she has grown used to lowering her head under judgment. The other stays silent because she is remembering every word, every contemptuous glance, every time she was forced to swallow her tears, so dinner could still look normal. My mother never knew the difference between the two. She always thought I was the first kind. My name is Lily Whitaker. On the morning after my 18th birthday at exactly 9:03 a.m., my mother placed a pale yellow folder on the kitchen table and slid it toward me, as if it were nothing more than a plate of pancakes. She smiled gently, the same kind of smile she used in front of neighbors, in front of the church women's group, in front of people who would never know how cold this house really was. She said, "Sweetheart, we need to talk about the money your grandfather left behind." I looked at the folder. Then I looked at her hand. Her nails were painted a soft pink, neat and calm, as if 4 months of preparing to control my future was simply an act of motherly love. Across the table, my stepfather Marcus Reed set his coffee cup down a little too hard. My stepsister Brianna sat beside him with her phone face down on the table. For the first time, she looked directly at me without smirking. If you have ever been forced into silence by your own family so they could control you more easily, comment 1. Because sometimes the quietest person in the house is the one who remembers everything most clearly. I did not open the folder right away. I only set my fork down, slowly letting the metal touch the plate just loud enough to be heard. The pancakes in front of me were still warm. The butter had melted into a small golden streak, and the smell of maple syrup was so sweet, it almost felt fake. Outside the window, the April sunlight fell across the front lawn, peaceful in the cruelest way. My mother kept smiling. "It's nothing serious, Lily. Just a few family papers. Once you sign them, everything will be easier for all of us." For all of us. I had heard that phrase too many times before. It always meant I had to lose something so everyone else could feel comfortable. A bedroom. A birthday. An opportunity. And this time they wanted my entire life. But what my mother did not know was that the night before at exactly 12:01 a.m., I had signed a different set of papers. The folder on that kitchen table was already dead before she ever pushed it toward me. My father died on a November morning when thick fog covered the interstate on the edge of Pennsylvania. His name was Daniel Whitaker. He was a delivery truck driver, the kind of man who always kept a pack of mints in the cup holder and a photo of me at 6 years old in his wallet. That day, he left the house before sunrise, kissed my forehead while I was still asleep, and never came home again. I was 10 years old when the police stood on our front porch. I still remember the officer's hat in his hands, and how his voice dropped low as if speaking softly could make the truth less cruel. My mother screamed and cried. I cried too. But only a week later her tears vanished as if they had never existed. She started talking about remodeling the kitchen, getting a new car, changing the curtains in the living room. I did not understand what life insurance money was, but I understood very quickly that my father's death had left my mother with something that kept her busier than grief. 2 years later, she married Marcus Reed. Marcus walked into my house with a big pickup truck, a loud laugh, and a daughter of his own named Brianna. Brianna was 2 years younger than me with bright blonde hair, and everyone was always saying she was lively, adorable, and full of potential. My father's small reading room was emptied out and turned into Brianna's bedroom. His old books were shoved into cardboard boxes in the basement. When I asked if I could keep his brown leather chair, my mother looked at me as if I had ruined the mood of our new family. She said, "Lily, you need to learn how to move on." But in that house, moving on always meant I had to move back. I learned 3 things very early. First, my mother did not like my tears. If I cried, she called it being dramatic. Second, she did not like my joy either. If I laughed too loudly, she told me I was trying to get attention. Third, the safest way to survive in my own home was to become smaller, quieter, less demanding, less in need of being loved. Marcus never hit me. He did not have. He simply looked through me as if I were an old piece of furniture left behind from my mother's previous marriage. At dinner, he asked Brianna about school, about swim team, about her friends. And when he spoke to me at all, it was always in a tone that sounded half joking, half warning. Lily is always quiet as a statue. She must be planning something. My mother laughed along. I lowered my eyes to my plate and said nothing. Not because I had nothing to say, but because I had learned that in this house, every feeling I had could be turned into evidence against me. So I stayed silent. But from the time I was 12, my silence was no longer obedience. It was where I kept everything. If silence was a way to survive in my mother's house, then at my grandparents' house, silence meant something entirely different. It was the sound of the ceiling fan turning slowly on a summer afternoon. It was the sound of Grandma Eleanor's knife, slicing apples in the kitchen. It was the sound of Grandpa Arthur turning soil in the garden where he grew tomatoes, basil, and a few rows of flowers my grandmother said served no purpose except to make people's hearts softer. I loved that house, the way a child loves the only place where she does not need permission to breathe. Grandma Eleanor was the first person who told me I was not hard to love. One afternoon, when I was 13, after my mother scolded me in front of Marcus for dropping a glass of orange juice, I rode my bike almost 2 miles to my grandmother's house. I did not cry until she opened the door. She did not ask questions right away. She simply pulled me into the kitchen, placed a cup of warm milk in front of me, and sat down across from me. Then she said, "You don't have to explain when you are hurting." That sentence stayed with me longer than any other comfort I had ever been given. Grandpa Arthur was quieter, but his love had a very clear shape. It lived in the coat he placed over my shoulders when the air turned cold. It was in the way he saved the best tomato for me. It was in all the times he drove to school to pick me up without asking why I did not want my mother to come. He never forced me to tell him anything. But whenever I did speak, he listened as if every word I said mattered. When Grandma Eleanor died of cancer, I was 14. My mother cried at exactly the right time in exactly the right place, at exactly the right volume. Then after the funeral, she quickly returned to fundraisers and church dinners. Grandpa Arthur did not cry in front of anyone. He simply aged very quickly. His back bent a little. His hands, once so steady around a shovel, began to tremble whenever he held a cup of tea. The summer I turned 16, I stayed with him for almost 2 months. I read to him on the porch, cooked his eggs the way he liked them, watered the garden, and sometimes just sat quietly beside him until the sun disappeared behind the maple trees. One evening he looked at me for a long time and said, "Lily, one day you will have to choose your own life, not the life other people want you to repay for them." I thought it was only the advice of an old man growing weaker. I was wrong. When he died in September, his lawyer read the will 2 weeks later. Grandpa Arthur left me a trust fund worth more than $680,000 made up of stocks, cash, and the small piece of land he had once sold in Bucks County. I would only receive full ownership once I turned 18. My mother sat very straight in the lawyer's office. She did not cry. She only stared at the number on the page with a look I was not old enough to name back then. Looking back now, I know it was not grief. It was calculation. 6 months before my 18th birthday, on an October evening, I found the cedarwood box Grandpa Arthur had left behind. It sat on the bookshelf in my room between a few old novels and a desk lamp with chipped paint. He had given it to me on my 17th birthday, back when he was still alive, back when he could still place it in my lap with his own hands, and tell me it held a few small family things. After the funeral, I had barely dared to open it again because every time I touched that wooden scent I missed him so badly I could hardly breathe. That night I did not know why I pulled it down. Maybe it was because downstairs my mother and Marcus were speaking very quietly. Maybe it was because for the past few weeks I had seen a man in a gray suit showing up every Wednesday afternoon. My mother said he was an insurance consultant. The next week she said he was one of Marcus's business friends. The story changed. But his leather briefcase did not. I opened the box. Inside was the pressed maple leaf from my grandparents' backyard, the old photograph of Grandpa Arthur and Grandma Eleanor on their anniversary, and a white envelope tucked at the bottom of the box. Across the front of the envelope was my grandfather's handwriting. Only open this if you feel something is wrong with your mother before your 18th birthday. Call Samuel Green immediately. I sat down on the edge of my bed. The whole room seemed to shrink around me. I read that line once, then again and again, until the words began to blur. My grandfather had known. Not exactly how everything would happen, but enough to fear that one day I might need a way out. From the kitchen downstairs came the sound of papers rustling. My mother's voice low and careful, Marcus answering in a deeper tone. I could not make out a single word, but my heart began to beat faster, as if my body understood before my mind did. I did not open the envelope that night. I slipped it into the pocket of my hoodie, then went downstairs to pour myself a glass of water. My mother was standing beside the table, one hand resting on a stack of papers she had just turned face down. Marcus leaned against the kitchen counter, looking at me with irritation in his eyes, as if I had interrupted something I was never supposed to see. My mother smiled. "You're still awake, Lily." I lifted the glass of water. I was just thirsty. She stepped closer and gently brushed my hair back tender, in a way that felt almost fake. "You've always been my good girl." I smiled back. But that night, for the first time in my life, I understood that my grandfather had not only left me a gift, he had left me a warning. On the Friday morning after I found the envelope, I took it to Willow Creek Park. The air was cold, the stone bench was damp, and the maple trees stood perfectly still as if they were keeping secrets. I sat there for a long time before I finally tore open the edge of the envelope. Inside was a letter from Grandpa Arthur. "Lily, if you are reading this, then my instinct was right. I do not want you to hate your mother, but I cannot let you walk into 18 with no one standing beside you. Samuel Green has been my lawyer for 30 years. He knows everything. Call him. You have the right to protect yourself." Below the words was a phone number. I stared at those digits until my fingertips turned numb from the cold. Then I called. The woman who answered went silent for a few seconds after hearing my name. Then she said, "Please hold for a moment, sweetheart." A moment later, a man's voice came on the line. "Lily Whitaker. Right. I've been waiting for this call." My throat tightened. For the first time, an adult spoke to me as if I had not imagined everything. Samuel Green asked me to come to his office in Lancaster. He told me to tell my mother it was a college financial planning consultation. Before he hung up, he said, "Do not change your expression. Do not change your routine. And whatever you do not let your mother know you called me." So I did exactly that. I still went to school, still washed the dishes, still listened to Marcus talk about money, as if he were the wisest person in the house. But from that day on, every small detail became sharper. The gray Lexus parked in front of the house every Wednesday afternoon. The man in the gray suit entering through the side door. Once I came home early from my library job because a snowstorm was about to start. Just as I opened the laundry room door, I heard my mother speaking in the kitchen. "Once she signs, the rest is just paperwork." Marcus asked, "What if she hesitates?" My mother gave a soft laugh. "Lily will sign. She always does." If you have ever been underestimated because you did not fight back right away, comment, "I understand." Because sometimes silence is not weakness. Sometimes it is the moment someone is quietly saving herself. I stood frozen in the laundry room. Something inside me went cold, but it did not break. Then I opened the door loudly and called out, "Mom, I'm home early. Papers were gathered in a hurry. When I walked in, the table was already empty. My mother turned toward me, her perfect smile looking as though it had just been pasted onto her face. Snow day, sweetheart. Should I make you some cocoa? I nodded. On the kitchen counter, half hidden beneath the edge of her purse, I saw the corner of a cream-colored document. Harrington and Cole Family Wealth Planning. I accepted the cup of cocoa. I said, "Thank you, Mom." Then I went upstairs and closed my bedroom door very quietly. That was the moment I stopped being the daughter who knew nothing. Samuel Green's office was on the second floor of an old brick building in Lancaster. There was a small bakery downstairs, so when I walked up the stairs, the smell of coffee and toasted butter clung to my coat, making everything feel strangely normal. I had imagined that a place where the truth was kept would be colder, more serious, more frightening. But his office only had a green desk lamp, several shelves filled with heavy law books, and a potted plant near the window that was wilting because someone had forgotten to water it. Samuel stood when I walked in. He was in his early 60s with silver hair, kind eyes, and an old but clean suit. He did not look at me like I was a child. He looked at me like someone walking into a war she had never chosen. He said, "Would you like water or tea?" I said, "Water, please." He placed a glass in front of me, then opened a file. No circling around the truth. No empty comfort. He explained every concept in the simplest words he could. Trust fund, beneficiary rights, asset manager, financial power of attorney, guardianship obligations. Every time I frowned, he stopped, wrote the term down on a piece of paper, and explained it again until I understood. After nearly 20 minutes, he slid a copy of a document toward me. My name was at the top of the page. Lily Grace Whitaker. Below it were the words, Whitaker Reed Family Financial Consolidation Agreement. I read slowly. The first page said my mother would become co-manager of the trust. The next page granted her durable financial power of attorney. Another section stated that my beneficiary interest would be transferred into a company called Reed Whitaker Holdings LLC. Near the final pages, the document mentioned family financial priorities, including support for Brianna Reed's tuition. I looked up. So they want to use my money to pay for Brianna's college. Samuel did not answer right away. He only looked at me with sadness in his eyes. More accurately, he said they want to turn your money into family money. Once it goes into that company, you would no longer have real control over it. I looked down at the drafting date. 4 months earlier, when I was still 17. But I was still a minor then. That is exactly why they need your mother's signature. As your guardian Samuel said, that is the most dangerous part. They did not wait for you to become an adult so they could ask for your opinion. They wanted to use her authority as your mother to lock away your choices before you were old enough to protect yourself. I set the document down on the desk. My hands were not shaking. That surprised me more than anything. 4 months. For 4 months I had eaten dinner with them, washed their dishes, listened to my mother call me her good girl while she quietly built a cage around my life. Samuel spoke softly. "Lily, you still have time." I looked at him. For the first time, I did not feel like I had been backed into a corner. I saw a door. I said, "Then help me lock it before they do." After that first meeting, I no longer saw money as just a number. Before then, more than $680,000 sounded like something too large, too distant, as if it belonged to adults inside closed rooms. But Samuel Green brought it down to the ground for me. He said money was not magic. It was only a system of pipes. If the valves were placed in the wrong hands, someone else would turn on the water and leave me standing there watching my own life drain away. We met 2 more times before my birthday. Each time I had a different reason to leave the house. A scholarship consultation. A campus visit. A longer shift at the library. My mother did not suspect anything, or maybe she believed I was too obedient to have secrets. That was almost funny. All my life, she had taught me how to hide my feelings, then failed to realize I had also learned how to hide a plan. Samuel introduced me to an asset management firm in Harrisburg. They were not family. There were no family dinners, no tears, no one calling me selfish when I said no. They only had procedures, signatures, clauses, and legal responsibility. For the first time, the coldness of paperwork made me feel safe. We created a new irrevocable trust. I was the only beneficiary. The money could only be used for tuition, reasonable housing, medical needs, emergency living expenses, and distributions that had to be reviewed and approved by a professional trustee. My mother, Marcus, Brianna, and any company connected to them were permanently excluded from management rights, beneficiary rights, and any form of interference. Samuel read each line slowly. You need to understand this, Lily. Once you sign even, you cannot change your mind, just because one day your mother cries in exactly the right way. I looked down at the draft. That sentence hurt more than I expected, because I knew I was still her daughter. Some part of me still wanted my mother to hold me without conditions. Some part of me still wanted to hear her say I mattered more than any amount of money. But a child can wish for her mother's love. An 18-year-old has to protect the rest of her life when that love never comes. Samuel asked, "What would you like to name the trust?" I thought of Grandma Eleanor. I thought of warm milk. I thought of the sentence she had once given me. You do not have to explain when you are hurting. I said, the Eleanor Trust. Samuel nodded and wrote it down. And in that moment, I understood that I was not only protecting money, I was protecting my right to live a life no one else could sign away for me. 3 days before my birthday, my mother announced that the whole family would be having dinner at Willow Creek Country Club. She said it was an early celebration because the next morning I would be busy preparing a few grown-up matters. The way she said the words grown-up made me understand that in her mind I only became an adult the moment my signature started to have value. The private dining room at the club had pale blue wallpaper, low chandeliers, and white napkins folded like bird wings. My mother wore a cream-colored dress and Grandma Eleanor's pearl necklace, the one she had taken after the funeral, because she said she was keeping it safe. Marcus wore a dark blue suit, the shoulders tight because he was trying to sit too straight. Brianna sat beside my mother, constantly checking her phone, but whenever Bucknell was mentioned, her eyes lit up. They had invited the pastor and his wife, a few friends from the church women's group, Marcus's business partners, and 2 neighbors. Too many people for an ordinary birthday. Too formal for a daughter. They rarely remembered to ask what kind of cake she wanted. When dessert came, my mother stood and lightly tapped her wine glass. Our Lily is about to turn 18, she said, her voice soft as velvet. I am so proud that she is about to make smart decisions for the future of our whole family. Our whole family? Not my future. If you have ever heard a compliment that smelled like control, underneath comment 2. Because sometimes the sweetest words are the ones used to tie your wrists. Everyone raised their glasses. I raised mine too. I smiled just enough. Marcus looked at me over the rim of his glass, the corner of his mouth lifting slightly. He did not say the words out loud, but I could read his lips. Big day. When I set my glass down, I saw a man sitting alone at a table not far away. Gray suit. Thinning hair. A leather briefcase placed beside the chair leg. He did not look at me for long. He only glanced toward Marcus, then gave a very small nod. Marcus nodded back. I had never been formally introduced to him, but I recognized the briefcase. I recognized the posture of a man who was used to being paid to turn greed into legal language. Lance Harrington was at my birthday dinner. One day early, I looked at my mother. She was still smiling at the guests, glowing like a devoted mother. But under the yellow light, that smile suddenly looked less like a birthday wish and more like a lock. The night of my 18th birthday had no cake, no singing, and no one knocking on my bedroom door to congratulate me the exact moment I crossed into adulthood. The house downstairs had gone dark long ago. My mother Marcus and Brianna were asleep with the peace of people who believed that the next morning, all they had to do was place a stack of papers in front of me, say a few words about family, and take away what my grandparents had spent their lives trying to protect. I locked my bedroom door at 11. Sishu. On my desk were my laptop, my ID, a glass of water, Grandpa Arthur's cedarwood box, and Grandma Eleanor's small earrings. I was wearing gray pajamas, my hair tied low wool socks on my feet. I did not want to look like a hero. I wanted to look like myself. The girl who had lived in this room for years. The girl who had learned how to cry without making a sound. The girl who had learned how to smile just small enough not to be scolded. Adon Sprezice. 52 Samuel Green joined the video call. Behind him came Priya Desai from the asset management firm in Harrisburg, followed by an online notary, licensed in Pennsylvania. They checked my documents, confirmed my identity, confirmed my date of birth, and confirmed that I understood what I was about to sign. Samuel asked Lily, "Are you sure?" I looked at the wooden box beside my laptop. In my mind, I saw my grandfather's tomato garden, my grandmother's cup of warm milk, and my mother's eyes when she stared at the number in the will. I said, "I'm sure." She. Devetten Pediset P. M. No one spoke anymore. There was only the digital clock on the screen, the sound of the heater running beneath the floor, and my heart beat so loud it felt like everyone could hear it. Midnight. 1 second later, the signature box appeared. I typed each letter slowly. Lily Grace Whitaker. No trembling. No rushing. No apology. The notary confirmed it. Priya confirmed it. Samuel read the final terms aloud, one last time. The assets were transferred into the Eleanor Trust. The trust was activated. I was the only beneficiary. My mother, Marcus, Brianna, and any related entities were permanently excluded. No amendments. No revocation. No reversal. Et dois presesha. O4A. M. Priya said the funds have been received. The Eleanor Trust is officially funded, and in effect, I did not cry right away. I only breathed out slowly, as if I had been holding air inside my chest for the past 6 months. Samuel looked at me through the screen. "Happy birthday, Lily. From now on, this life is yours." After the call ended, the room became strangely quiet. I placed my hand on the lid of the wooden box. For the first time in a very long time, silence no longer felt like fear. It felt like freedom. The next morning I woke up before my alarm. The house was quiet like a stage before the velvet curtain rises, when all the actors are already in place, and only one person knows the play will end differently from the script. I put on jeans, a cream sweater, and Grandma Eleanor's earrings. In the mirror, my face did not look bright or excited. It looked so calm that even I found it strange. I said, "The silent daughter." Then I went downstairs. The kitchen smelled like pancakes. My mother stood by the stove in a pink robe, wearing the gentle expression of every mother in a commercial. Marcus held his coffee cup. Brianna sat beside him with her phone face down, her eyes, avoiding mine. On the table beside the maple syrup, the pale yellow folder was already waiting. My mother turned around. "There's my birthday girl. Happy 18th birthday, Lily." She hugged me longer than usual. For one moment, the child inside me still wanted to believe that hug was real. But when she let go, her eyes flicked toward the folder. Marcus stuck a candle into the stack of pancakes, lit it, and said, "Make a wish." Big day. I leaned down and blew out the candle. In my mind, I only wished that Grandpa Arthur and Grandma Eleanor knew I had listened to them. My mother let me eat 2 bites. Then she placed both hands on the table, her voice softening. Sweetheart, now that you're an adult, there are a few things we need to handle, so everything stays safe for the family. I set my fork down. About Grandpa's money. Her smile caught for half a second. That's right. You're so smart. She pushed the folder toward me. I opened it. The first page had my name on it. Lily Grace Whitaker. Below it was the Family Financial Consolidation Agreement. I read every line without skipping a single word. My mother was still smiling during the first minute. By the third minute, she had started tapping her nails against her cup. By the fifth minute, Marcus lost his patience. Lily, you don't need to read all of that. The lawyer prepared it. I did not look up. I like to understand what I sign. He gave a short laugh. It's just a financial structure. I turned to page 5. What is Reed Whitaker Holdings, LLC? My mother answered too quickly. Just a family company for tax efficiency. When was it created? She went silent. I looked at Marcus. And why does this document include tuition support for Brianna? Brianna's face went pale. Marcus set his cup down hard on the table. Because family helps family. Don't be selfish on your birthday. If you have ever been called selfish just because you refuse to let someone take what belonged to you, comment 3. Because some people only call you family when they need the key to your safe. My mother lowered her voice. Lily, I'm doing all of this for you. You're young. You don't understand how many people out there would try to take advantage of your money. I closed the folder. I understand. That's why I'd like to call the family lawyer and ask a few more questions. My mother's face hardened. There is no need to call Samuel Green. I looked at her. I never said his name to you. She opened her mouth, but she did not get the chance to speak. At that exact moment, my phone vibrated. The screen lit up. Joe. 03 M. Samuel Green, Esquire. I placed the phone between the folder and the plate of pancakes, then asked, Do you mind if I put him on speaker? I answered the call and put it on speaker. Samuel Green's voice came through calm and clear, as if he had been waiting for this moment for a long time. Good morning, Lily. Happy birthday. Am I interrupting breakfast? I looked at my mother, then at Marcus, then at the folder. No. We were just talking about money. Samuel paused for half a second. Then my timing is perfect. I'm calling to confirm that the asset transfer was completed at 12:04 a.m. this morning. The Eleanor Trust has been fully funded. The trustee is Midland Trust Services. The structure is legally effective and irrevocable. It was as if all the air had been pulled from the kitchen. My mother dropped her fork onto her plate. Marcus shot to his feet. Brianna looked from me to my mother, her face drained white. My mother whispered, Lily, what have you done? I said I protected what Grandma and Grandpa left for me. Marcus slammed his hand down on the table. You had no right to do that behind our backs. Samuel answered immediately, his voice still gentle. Esther. Reed Lily signed the documents after turning 18 with proper notarization and independent counsel. She had every legal right to do so. I would advise you to be very careful about what you say on this call. Marcus sat back down, his face turning red, then almost purple. Samuel continued. My office has received a copy of the draft Family Financial Consolidation Agreement from Harrington and Cole. That document was prepared while Lily was still a minor, with provisions granting financial power of attorney to Mrs. Caroline Reed, transferring her beneficiary interest into Reed Whitaker Holdings, LLC, and referencing tuition support for Brianna Reed. Brianna burst into tears. Mom, you said it was only part of it. That sentence made my mother close her eyes. I looked at her. So Brianna heard a different version too. My mother's voice trembled. I only wanted to keep the family stable. Marcus is struggling. Brianna needs tuition. And you still had far too much money for a child. I heard that sentence, and something inside me let go. Not anger. Only clarity. I am not this family's bank, I said. And I am not the price of the adults' mistakes. Samuel said I have filed a formal complaint regarding Harrington's role. I also recommend that Lily keep that folder as evidence. My mother cried. The tears looked real. But tears could not erase signatures. They could not erase 4 months of planning. They could not turn greed into love. I picked up the folder. I'm keeping this. Lily, my mother said, her voice breaking. I'm your mother. I stood. Yes. And that is what makes this hurt more, not less. At the kitchen doorway, Brianna called out very softly, I didn't know all of it. I turned back. I believe you. But you need to find out the rest for yourself. Then I walked out of the kitchen, where for the first time in my life, the silence no longer belonged to me. It belonged to them. On the front porch, the April air felt colder than I expected. Sunlight fell across the front lawn, across Marcus's pickup truck, across the flower beds. My mother had planted, so the neighbors would look over and believe this was a decent family. I stood there for a few seconds on the front step, holding the pale yellow folder against my chest, then took a deep breath. At the end of the driveway, Aunt Nora was waiting in her old Honda Civic. She did not honk. She did not wave. She just sat there letting me walk toward her on my own 2 feet. When I opened the car door, she looked at me for a long moment and said, Do you want to go back in and get anything else? I looked at the house behind me. The front door was still slightly open. From inside, I could no longer hear my mother crying or Marcus shouting. There was only a heavy silence, as if that house had finally been forced to listen to itself. I said no. I brought the most important things with me. Aunt Nora nodded and drove away. 3 months later, I moved into a dorm at Penn State. The room was small, with white walls and a window overlooking a row of trees. My roommate's name was Maya. She laughed loudly and asked me on the very first day if I wanted to get pizza. I laughed with her. A real laugh. Not lowered. Not softened. Not followed by a glance around the room to see who was annoyed. That night, I placed Grandpa Arthur's cedarwood box on my desk. Beside it, I set Grandma Eleanor's earrings and a copy of the Eleanor Trust documents. I looked at them for a long time, then realized I had not only survived I had stepped out of a role someone else had been writing for me since I was a child. My mother texted me twice that fall. Once she asked if I was safe. Once she said she missed me. I did not answer. Not to punish her, but because my peace was no longer something I had to negotiate. If you have ever had to leave a place once called home in order to keep yourself comment freedom. Because sometimes growing up does not mean forgiving right away. Sometimes it means knowing you do not have to return to the place that once made you disappear. 1 year later, on my 19th birthday, I sat in the library and opened the trust report. The words, "The Eleanor Trust," appeared clearly on the screen. I placed my hand over them and whispered I chose my life. And for the first time, the silence around me was no longer frightening. It was peace.